This is an overview of process redesign, also known as business process reengineering. This little cartoon we have here is a dog juggling on a tightrope, and it says, "High above the hushed crowd, Rex tried to remain focused. Still, he couldn't shake one nagging thought. He was an old dog, and this was a new trick." And that's what we're talking about with reengineering. It builds off what we've talked about previously, where continuous improvement or total quality management is about creating better practices. Benchmarking is about finding best practice and meeting best practices, whereas reengineering is about taking quantum leaps. Reengineering is the fundamental rethinking and radical redesign of core business processes to achieve dramatic improvements in critical performance measures such as quality, cost, and cycle time. The extremist view would be obliterate what you have now and start from scratch, or transform every aspect of your organization. What reengineering is not, it's not about automating poor processes. It's not about doing less with less. It's not about cutting costs or reducing payroll. It is totally about innovation. It's important to know what a process is. It's a simply structured, measured set of activities designed to produce a specific output for a particular customer, for particular customers or a particular market. Characteristics of a process is it's a specific sequences of work activities across time and place. It has a beginning and an end. It has clearly defined inputs and outputs. It is customer focused. It shows how work gets done. It defines the process ownership, and it deals with measurable and meaningful performance. The great Peter Drucker has stated, what our business is not determined by the producer, but by the customer. By the want the customer satisfies when he or she buys the product or service. Processes cut through organizations and oftentimes go through all of these cross-functional areas. So to get from the supplier to the customer, it might have to deal with things like marketing and purchasing and production and distribution and accounting and on and on. And reengineering is there to take a step back and say, how could we make the direct path from the supplier to the customer more effective and more value adding in terms of how the customer receives products and services. Good example will be Taco Bell. This is a while back. John Martin, who was CEO at the time, says we were going backwards fast. It simply, if something was simple, we made it complex. If it was hard, we figured out how to make it impossible. The customer purchases for $1 were worth about 25 cents. So 75 cents of that dollar of purchase went into marketing, advertising, and overhead. Only 25 cents was what the customer received. And to re-engineer from the customer's point of view would be asking the question, are customers willing to pay for these quote-unquote value-added activities, such as advertising? So Taco Bell had this vision of wanting to be number one in terms of share of stomach. And to do that, they made the decision to slash the size of the kitchens, where the kitchen to seating capacity ratio originally was 70% kitchen, 30% seating. They reversed that to 30% kitchen, making it much smaller, and 70% seating capacity. They eliminated district managers. Restaurant managers were then given specific to their location the profit and loss responsibility. They moved the cooking of meat and beans outside of the kitchen. They would boost peak serving capacity at an average restaurant from $400 an hour to $1,500 an hour. There was $500 million, which was occurring regionally, and within 10 years, it increased to $3 billion, which was an incredible move by making these shifts at Taco Bell. So a good example here would be somebody looking at the lines and making a judgment of having all these different lines out there and then saying, geez, which one is shorter? That's dealing with a current state mentality. Whereas a re-engineering of that process might be to have one queue serving multiple points, which you've all seen today. This is how most fast food restaurants work in terms of a redesign process. So principles related to re-engineering is to organize around the outcomes, not the tasks. To have those who use the output of the process actually perform the process. To subsume information processing work into the real work that produces the information. Very often you'll see measurement happening outside of the process. They put this inside the process. To treat geographically dispersed resources as though they were centralized. Linking parallel processes instead of integrating them after the fact in the results. To put decision points where the work is being built, where it's being performed, and build controls into the process, and capture all information once and at the source. All of these shows a far more efficient approach to service delivery. A business process reengineering framework takes a look at all aspects of a process. It's the organization, the skills, the structures, the values, the reward systems, the enabling technologies that are available, the organizations and architectures that exist, and the processes themselves, the core business processes, which and judging them against their value add, the customer focus, and continuing to innovate to make sure that they are more customer focused and value adding. Reengineering is a life cycle like any other process. It's defining the business goals. It's identifying which processes need to be looked at. It's analyzing and measuring the way they exist today. And then enabling IT systems to generate alternative process and redesigns. And then evaluating this process redesign, implementing it, and continually improving against that process. And that's a basic reengineering cycle. How do you pick a process? Well, you have to prioritize these. So are there processes that are broken or that have bottlenecks or apply across cross-functional or cross-organizational units? Or are they processes that have very high impacts? Do they deal with frontline and customer servicing, which is sort of your moment of truth parts of an organization? Are they high value adding? Are they part of new services or new processes? And are they indeed even feasible to change? The thought process is to flip the chart and think about the customer first, define the customer outcomes. And that should be the leader of your redesign activities and tasks, which then can permeate across the various functions and processes across the organization, as well as the job responsibilities of people in those organizations and how it's managed under the organizational hierarchy. A quick example to show you is going to be the Mayo Clinic. When we think about reengineering, you automatically go to things like retail, service delivery, or we think of manufacturing. We're going to go to one that's design thinking within healthcare. And the person, Nicholas Russo, who was a physician at the Mayo Clinic, he began asking himself questions. if we can test drugs in clinical trials, can we also test new kinds of doctor-patient interactions? It's a very interesting question. Although over the last 50 years, there had been enormous advances in diagnosing and treating disease, the systems of delivering healthcare had changed very little. In fact, new tests, treatments, and procedures meant that the healthcare experience had become increasingly complex for provider and patient alike. But what if there were ways to provide better ways to provide healthcare? LaRusso basically was thinking, with new technology, new diagnostic tests, new therapeutics, will be the most effective if we can improve the ways we can deliver these enormous advances to patients. He had heard that design firms existed. One of them was IDEO is the way it's said, were offering consulting services in the area of human factors design. And he wondered if their work might be applicable in healthcare setting. Mayo had a history of innovation in healthcare, and starting with the invention of the patient medical record in the early 20th century. And the clinic was always looking for ways to improve both patient outcomes and the healthcare experience. Back in 2002, in consultation with this IDEO, LaRusso and one of his colleagues, Michael Brennan, opened up what they called a skunkworks outpatient lab called SPARC, S-P-A-R-C, where physicians and designers could test hypotheses about ways in which providers and patients would interact. They dealt with a number of challenges, recruiting busy physicians to a new and untested type of research, crossing the cultural divide between physicians and designers, doing experimentation with real patients, and gaining institutional support for their unusual endeavor. Within 6 years, the lab had grown from a small venture to an enterprise-wide Center for Innovation, which is CFI, a dedicated research institute that studies the processes of healthcare provision, from the initial phone call to the clinic visit, to the diagnosis and treatment of the problem, to follow-up and preventative care. 8 years later, in 2010, the CFI was a respected internal consultancy of the Mayo Clinic. It had 5 platforms that encompassed various kinds of service redesign, and it had grown from 2 full-time employees to 32. It had undertaken projects to reorganize the workflows in a practice, test new strategies for patient education, use technology to improve physician consultations, and redesign the traditional exam room. At the same time, CFI designers and physicians acknowledged that the innovations they had developed were small, and they spoke to the goal of transformational change. But in 2010, there were questions about how the CFI would achieve its stated aspirations. What would a major change in healthcare delivery look like? How should the CFI's impact be measured? Were the center's structures and processes appropriate for transformational change? Oops, sorry about that. So they led to a new approach. Leading companies were accelerating innovation through a concept which was relatively new to their business strategies called design thinking. It's a creative problem-solving approach that the center uses to revolutionize the experience and delivery of healthcare by going beyond process analysis and quality improvement. Design thinking has become a vital tool in fueling business innovations. The questions: what is our product? Are we delivering it in a way that makes the consumer feel good about the experience? Are we providing a service that won't become obsolete? In healthcare, design thinking has played a role in creating competition in medical innovation where there previously was none. Mayo Clinic's Center for Innovation fuses design principles with the scientific method to uncover human needs in the healthcare environment which includes empathy, creativity, systems thinking, and a human-centered focus. Design methods include things that are hard for me to pronounce, but ethnography or something, whatever you say, however you say that, and observational techniques, visualization, prototyping, sketching, storytelling, brainstorming, and more. The complement of design allows the center to think beyond what it normally does and serve as a translator for ideas and possibilities. The center employs a diverse research team to design solutions that creatively address patient needs. So to kind of wrap this up, so what are the capabilities and services that they looked at? Design, research, and strategy, service and experience design, product design, design thinking education, and environment evaluation and modification. The goals of the center now are to focus on the human experience, to identify needs and design services, products, and business models to meet them, to innovate care delivery that's accessible, affordable, and value-driven, to collaborate openly, internally and externally, and to generate economic value by demonstrating financial return from sustainable delivery models, services, and products. Their approach, the Center for Innovation, works with a think big, start small, move fast philosophy, which basically has the concepts of connect, design, and enable, bring people together in new ways inside and outside of the Mayo Clinic, to identify opportunities and realize solutions that transform care and delivery and experience, and to facilitate and accelerate innovation across the Mayo Clinic. So here's a very successful example of a very unique example of how the Mayo Clinic used business process reengineering. We're going to leave it there for now and cover the rest of this in our class.